My life in shambles, my heart shattered like a mirror dropped from a 10th-story window. It all started innocently enough, a business trip, a few days away from home. Who knew that those 72 hours would be the last moments of my life as I knew it? The drive home from the airport was uneventful. Just another Tuesday afternoon in suburbia. Kids playing in their yards, sprinklers hissing, the scent of freshly mown grass hanging in the air. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even. But normalcy, I've learned, is just a thin veneer plastered over the chaos that lurks beneath. I pulled into our driveway, the same one ID left just days before. The house looked the same: red brick, white trim, neatly manicured lawn. But something felt off. Maybe it was the eerie silence or the way the curtains were drawn tight against the afternoon sun. Whatever it was, it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I fumbled with my keys, my hands suddenly clumsy as I tried to unlock the front door. The house was quiet, too quiet. "Amber?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty foyer. No answer. I made my way to the kitchen, expecting to find a note on the fridge: "Gone to the store, be back soon," or at yoga, leftovers in the microwave. But the fridge was bare, save for a few condiments and a half-empty carton of milk. That S when I saw it. A crisp white envelope on the kitchen counter, my name scrawled across it in Amber S-flowing handwriting. My heart sank as I reached for it, my fingers trembling as I tore it open. The words on the page hit me like a freight train. "Brad, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I've signed the divorce papers. You have 1 week to comply or I'll take everything you own. Don't try to find me. Goodbye, Amber." I read the note once, twice, 3 times, each time hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something less devastating. But they remained stubbornly, brutally unchanged. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. We had our problems, sure, but what couple didn't it? I thought we were happy, or at least on the road to happiness. We'd been talking about starting a family, for Christ's sake. And now? This? I stumbled to the liquor cabinet, my hands shaking as I poured myself a generous glass of whiskey. The amber liquid burned as it went down, but I welcomed the pain. It was something tangible, something real in a world that had suddenly become surreal. As the initial shock wore off, anger began to seep in, filling the void left by my disbelief. Who the hell did she think she was, threatening to take everything? ID worked my ass off for years, building my business from the ground up, and now she thought she could just walk away with it all? I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying over the keypad as I dialed Amber S' number, straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again, and again. Each time, her cheerful greeting mocked me. "Hi, you've reached Amber. Leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." I hurled the phone across the room, watching with grim satisfaction as it shattered against the wall. The sound of breaking glass was oddly cathartic, a physical manifestation of the destruction happening in my life. As night fell, I found myself pacing the house like a caged animal, my mind churning with questions. How long had she been planning this? Was there someone else? And most importantly, how the hell was I going to fight this? That S, when I remembered Dave. We met at a business conference a few years back, and he'd given me his card just in case, he said with a wink. ID tucked it away in my desk drawer, never thinking I'd actually need the services of a private investigator. With trembling hands, I dug through the drawer until I found the card. It was slightly dog-eared, the edges worn, but the number was still clear. I dialed, praying he'd pick up despite the late hour. "Dave speaking," a gruff voice answered on the third ring. "Dave, it's Brad Thompson. We met at, I remember. He cut me off. What can I do for you, Brad?" I took a deep breath, then spilled the whole sordid tale. To his credit, Dave listened without interruption, only grunting occasionally to show he was still there. "Sounds like you've got yourself in a real mess," he said when I finally finished. "I can start digging first thing tomorrow. But Brad, I gotta warn you sometimes what we find ain't a pretty." "I don't care," I said, my voice hard. "I need to know the truth, no matter how ugly it is." We made arrangements to meet the next day, and I hung up feeling, not better exactly, but more focused. I had a plan now, a course of action. It wasn't much, but it was something to cling to in the storm that had become my life. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every moment of my relationship with Amber, searching for clues I might have missed. The way she'd been distant lately, always on her phone, the sudden interest in her appearance, buying new clothes and spending hours at the gym, the late nights at the office, the whispered phone calls. God, how could I have been so blind? As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I showered and dressed mechanically, going through the motions of normalcy even as my world crumbled around me. I met Dave at a dingy diner on the outskirts of town. He was a bear of a man with a wild beard and eyes that had seen too much. He ordered coffee, black, and got straight to business. "All right, Brad, tell me everything you know about your wife's routine, her friends, her habits. Leave nothing out, no matter how insignificant it might seem." For the next hour, I talked. I told him about Amber's job at the law firm, her yoga classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, her girls' nights out every other Friday. I mentioned her sudden interest in her appearance, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. Dave listened intently, scribbling notes in a battered notebook. When I finally ran out of words, he leaned back in his seat, stroking his beard thoughtfully. "Okay, here was what we are going to do," he said, his voice low. "I'm going to tail her, see where she goes, who she meets. I'll also do some digging into her financials, see if there's anything fishy going on there. In the meantime, I need you to act normal. Go to work, stick to your routine. The last thing we want is to tip her off that we are onto her." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Relief that something was being done, dread at what we might uncover. As I left the diner, Dave called after me. "Brad, one more thing. Don't to do anything stupid, you hear me? No confrontations, no accusations. Let me do my job." I nodded again, but inside, a voice was screaming. How was I supposed to act normal when my entire world had been turned upside down? The next few days were a special kind of hell. I went through the motions at work, smiling and nodding at the right times, but inside I was a seething mass of anger and hurt. Every night I'd come home to an empty house, the silence mocking me. On the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I decided to confront Sarah, Amber's best friend and co-worker. If anyone knew what was going on, it would be her. I waited outside their office building, my heart pounding as I watched the steady stream of people leaving for the day. Finally, I spotted Sarah, her blonde hair catching the late afternoon sun. "Sarah!" I called out, jogging to catch up with her. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Brad, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "About Amber." Sarah's face clouded over, and I knew in that instant that she knew something. I don't think that is a good idea, Brad," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Please, Sarah," I said, hating the desperation in my voice. "I need to know what is going on. Where is she? Why did she leave?" Sarah hesitated, chewing on her lower lip. Finally, she sighed. "Look, Brad, I shouldn't be telling you this, but Amber's been acting strange for months now, always on her phone, taking mysterious calls. And there's been talk around the office." "Talk? What kind of talk?" I demanded, my voice rising. Sarah looked around nervously, then leaned in close. "People have seen her with someone. A man. They say she is having an affair." The world tilted on its axis, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. An affair. The words echoed in my head, each repetition like a hammer blow to my heart. "Who is he?" I growled, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. Sarah shook her head. "I don't know, Brad, I swear. All I know is that it's been going on for a while, and I think it is serious." I stumbled away from her, my mind reeling. An affair. Amber, my Amber, in the arms of another man. The image burned in my brain, fueling a rage I didn't know I was capable of. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Got something. Meet me at the diner in an hour." I arrived at the diner early, my leg bouncing nervously as I waited for Dave. When he finally walked in, his face was grim. "What did you find?" I asked as soon as he sat down. Dave sighed, pulling out his notebook. It's not good, Brad. Your wife. She's been making some interesting financial moves. Large sums of money being transferred to an offshore account. And there's more." He pushed a manila envelope across the table. With shaking hands, I opened it, pulling out a stack of photos. My breath caught in my throat as I flipped through them. Amber, my Amber, in the arms of a man I'd never seen before, kissing him passionately outside a seedy motel, entering a bank hand in hand, boarding a cruise ship, her head thrown back in laughter as he whispered in her ear. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Jake Miller," Dave said. "He is a small-time con artist with a rap sheet a mile long. Brad, I think your wife is involved in something bigger than just an affair. These financial transactions, the secrecy. It smells like fraud to me." I sat there staring at the photos, feeling like I was watching my life crumble in real time. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was not just cheating on me. She was a criminal, planning to run off with some lowlife and leave me with nothing. As the reality of the situation sank in, something inside me snapped. The hurt, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all coalesced into a white-hot rage that threatened to consume me. "I'm going to destroy her," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I am going to take everything from her just like she tried to do to me." Dave looked at me, concern etched on his weathered face. "Brad, listen to me. You need to be smart about this. We've got evidence of illegal activity here. Let's take this to the authorities, do this the right way." But I wasn't listening anymore. All I could think about was revenge, about making Amber pay for what she'd done. As I stormed out of the diner, Dave's warnings falling on deaf ears, I knew one thing for certain. This was war, and I intended to win. The next few days passed in a blur of rage and planning. I barely slept, barely ate. My mind was a war room, strategizing how to bring Amber down. Dave's warnings echoed in my head, but I pushed them aside. This wasn't about being smart anymore. This was about justice, my own twisted version of it. I threw myself into digging up every scrap of information I could find on Jake Miller. The internet was a gold mine of dirty secrets if you knew where to look. And boy, did Jake have secrets. Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, the list went on and on. How Amber had fallen for this lowlife was beyond me. But then again, maybe they deserved each other. As I scrolled through Jake's social media, a notification popped up on my phone. A charge on our joint credit card, $5,000 at a jewelry store downtown. My blood boiled. She was spending my money on him. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. The drive to the jewelry store was a blur of red lights and honking horns. I barely registered the concerned looks from other drivers as I weaved through traffic like a madman. The store was one of those high-end places, all gleaming glass and polished marble. I burst through the doors, my eyes scanning the room wildly until I spotted them. Amber and Jake, huddled together at a display case, laughing and pointing at something inside. "Having fun spending my money?" I snarled, stalking towards them. Amber's head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock and fear. Jake, to his credit, didn't flinch. He just stood there, a smug smile on his face that made me want to rearrange his teeth. "Brad," Amber said, her voice shaking. "What are you doing here?" "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing," I spat. "Figured you'd be halfway to the Cayman Islands by now with all the money you've been siphoning off." Jake stepped forward, placing himself between me and Amber. "Look, buddy, I think you need to calm down," I saw red. Before I realized it, my fist was slamming into Jake's solar plexus. He stumbled backward, knocking over a display case. The crash of shattering glass filled the air, along with Amber's scream. Security guards appeared out of nowhere, grabbing my arms and pinning them behind my back. I struggled against their grip, my eyes locked on Amber's terrified face. "You think you can just take everything from me?" I yelled as they dragged me away. "This isn't tea over, Amber, not by a long shot." The next thing I knew, I was sitting in the back of a police cruiser, my knuckles throbbing and my mind reeling. What the hell had I just done? The officer in the front seat turned to look at me, his face a mixture of pity and disappointment. "You want to tell me what that was all about, son?" I laughed bitterly. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." He shrugged. "Try me. Got nothing but time on our hands till we get to the station." So I told him. Everything. The note, the affair, the fraud. It all came pouring out in a torrent of words and emotions. By the time I finished, we were pulling into the station parking lot. The officer Johnson, his name tag read, was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "Look, I get it. You are hurting. But this ain't the way to handle it." You were lucky Mr. Miller isn't pressing charges. I blinked in surprise. He's not? Johnson shook his head. Nope. Says he doesn't want any trouble. But let me give you some free advice. Stay away from them. You go near either of them again and you'll be facing stalking charges. Got it? I nodded numbly, the adrenaline finally wearing off and leaving me feeling hollow and exhausted. Good, Johnson said. Now get out of here. And for God's sake, get yourself a good lawyer. I stumbled out of the cruiser, the world spinning around me. What the hell had I done? ID played right into their hands, giving them ammunition to use against me. God, I was such an idiot. I called an Uber, not trusting myself to drive. As I waited, I pulled out my phone and dialed Dave S. number. You stupid son of a bitch, he growled when he picked up. What part of Dante do anything stupid didn't you understand? I know, I said, rubbing my temples. I screwed up. Screwed up? Brad, you assaulted a man in broad daylight, in front of witnesses. Do you have any idea how much harder you've made this? I sank down onto the curb, feeling the weight of my actions crushing me. What do I do now, Dave? He was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. All right, here's what we were going to do. You're going to go home and stay there. Don't talk to anyone. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to make some calls, see if I can dig us out of this hole you've put us in. I nodded, then remembered he couldn't see me. Okay, thanks, Dave. Done to thank me yet, he grumbled. And Brad, if you pull another stunt like this, I am out. Got it? Got it, I said, then hung up as my Uber pulled up. The ride home was silent, the driver sensing my mood and wisely keeping his mouth shut. As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed something odd. The front door was slightly ajar. My heart rate picked up. Had Amber come back? Or worse, had Jake decided to pay me a visit? I approached the door cautiously, every nerve in my body on high alert. As I pushed it open, I was hit with a wave of cold air. The house was freezing, like someone had left all the windows open. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing in the empty foyer. No response. I moved through the house, checking each room. Nothing seemed out of place, but that feeling of wrongness persisted. It wasn't until I reached my study that I realized what it was. The safe. The door was open, swinging gently in the breeze from the open window. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor. The safe, where I kept all my important documents, my passport, the deed to the house, and most importantly, the evidence I'd been gathering against Amber. It was all gone. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty safe. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed to have lost all meaning. I was vaguely aware of my phone buzzing in my pocket, but I couldn't bring myself to answer it. A hand on my shoulder startled me out of my stupor. I looked up to see Dave standing over me, his face grim. Jesus, Brad, he said, taking in the scene. What happened? I gestured weakly at the safe. They took everything, Dave. All the evidence. It's gone. Dave swore colorfully, pacing the room. All right, we need to call the police. Report a break-in. I laughed humorlessly. And tell them what? That my soon-to-be ex-wife stole the evidence I'd been gathering against her? After I assaulted her boyfriend in public? Dave ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. Damn it, Brad. You've really stepped in it this time. He was right, of course. ID screwed up royally, let my emotions get the better of me. And now? Now I had nothing. No evidence, no leverage, nothing. Dave's phone buzzed, and he stepped out of the room to answer it. I could hear his muffled voice growing increasingly agitated. When he came back, his face was ashen. That was my contact at the bank, he said, his voice low. Brad, all your accounts have been emptied. Every last cent. The world tilted on its axis, and for a moment I thought I might pass out. How? I managed to croak out. Looks like Amber had power of attorney, Dave said. She transferred everything to an offshore account this morning, right after your little scene at the jewelry store. The magnitude of what had happened hit me like a freight train. In the span of a few days, ID lost everything. My wife, my money, my future. All gone, slipped through my fingers like sand. I stumbled to my feet, the room spinning around me. I need some air, I muttered, pushing past Dave and out of the house. The night was cool, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the old oak tree in my front yard. I sank down onto the porch steps, my head in my hands. How had it come to this? Just a week ago, I'd have been happily married, successful, with a bright future ahead of me. Now? Now I was a broke, disgraced man with nothing to show for years of hard work and dedication. A car pulled up in front of the house, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I squinted, trying to make out who it was. As the driver's door opened, my heart stopped. Amber stepped out, looking as beautiful as ever in a sleek black dress. She walked towards me, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Hello, Brad," she said, her voice cool and composed. I stared at her, 1,000 emotions warring inside me. Anger, hurt, confusion, and underneath it all a traitorous flicker of love. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do it?" She sighed, sitting down next to me on the steps. "It wasn't personal, Brad. It was just an opportunity. Jake showed me a world I never knew existed. Excitement, danger, the thrill of the con. After years of being the perfect wife, the perfect lawyer, I was tired of playing by the rules." I laughed bitterly. "So you decided to throw away our marriage, steal all my money, and run off with a con artist? That is one hell of a midlife crisis, Amber." She had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "I never meant for it to go this far. But then you started digging, hired that investigator. I panicked. I had to protect myself." "Protect yourself?" I spat. "You've ruined me, Amber, taken everything. What am I supposed to do now?" She stood up, brushing off her dress. "You'll figure it out, Brad. You always do. That's one of the things I admired about you." As she turned to leave, I called out, "Was any of it real? Did you ever love me at all?" She paused, her back to me. For a moment, I thought I saw her shoulders slump, but when she turned back, her face was a mask of indifference. "Goodbye, Brad," she said softly, then walked back to her car. I watched as she drove away, taking the last shreds of my old life with her. As her taillights disappeared into the night, I felt something inside me harden. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Amber and Jake might think they'd won, but they had no idea what I was capable of. They'd taken everything from me, left me with nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is a dangerous thing indeed. I stood up, a new resolve burning in my chest. I'd been playing by their rules, trying to fight fair in a game that was anything but. No more. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. I walked back into the house, my mind already formulating a plan. Dave was still in the study, on the phone with someone. He looked up as I entered, his eyes widening at the change in my demeanor. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then hung up. "Brad, you okay?" I smiled and I saw Dave flinch slightly. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm better than okay, Dave. I've got a plan." "Oh no," Dave groaned. "Brad, whatever you're thinking, they think they've won," I interrupted. "They think they've beaten me, left me with nothing. But they are wrong. I've still got one thing left, yeah? What's that?" My smile widened, cold and dangerous. Knowledge. I know how they operate now. I know their weaknesses, their patterns, and I'm going to use that knowledge to bring them down. Dave looked at me warily. "What are you planning, Brad?" I shook my head. "The less you know, the better. Plausible deniability and all that, but I'm going to need your help with one thing." "What's that?" "I need you to find out where they're going. They'll be leaving the country soon, I'm sure of it. I need to know where and when." Dave hesitated, clearly torn between his professional instincts and his loyalty to me. Finally, he sighed. "All right, I'll see what I can dig up. But Brad, promise me you won't do anything stupid." Again. I nodded, but we both knew it was a lie. I was way past the point of playing it safe. As Dave left to make his calls, I sat down at my desk, pulling out a fresh notebook. It was time to start planning my revenge. Amber and Jake had no idea what was coming for them. They'd had taken everything from me. Now, I was going to return the favor, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. Dave came through with the information I needed. Amber and Jake were booked on a flight to the Cayman Islands in 3 days. It wasn't too much time, but it would have to be enough. I had no intention of letting them leave the country with my money. I started by reaching out to some old contacts from my business days, people ID helped in the past, people who owed me favors. It's amazing how many doors open when you are willing to call in every chip you have ever earned. One of those contacts was Mike, a cybersecurity expert ID hired a few years back to shore up my company's defenses. He owed me big time, and now it was time to collect. Jesus, Brad, Mike said when I explained what I needed. This is some serious black hat stuff. You sure about this? Never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied, my voice hard. Mike hesitated, then sighed. All right, man. But if this goes south, you never heard of me. Got it? I nodded, and Mike got to work. His fingers flew over the keyboard, lines of code scrolling across the screen faster than I could follow. After what felt like hours, he sat back with a satisfied grin. Done, he said. I've got access to their emails, text messages, everything. If they so much as order a pizza, we'll know about it. I clapped him on the shoulder. Thanks, Mike. I owe you one. He shook his head. After this, we are even, Brad. And good luck, man. I hope you nail these bastards to the wall. As Mike left, I turned back to the computer, scrolling through the treasure trove of information he uncovered. Emails between Amber and Jake detailing their plans. Bank statements showing the transfer of my money, and most importantly, the details of their escape plan. They weren't just going to the Cayman Islands for a vacation. They were planning to disappear there, start new lives with new identities. My blood boiled as I read their excited messages about their fresh start. But the real kicker? They weren't planning on leaving together. Jake was booked on an earlier flight, taking the bulk of the money with him. Amber was to follow a day later once she tied up any loose ends. I laughed bitterly. Even in this, Amber was being played. Jake had no intention of waiting for her. He was going to take the money and run, leaving her high and dry. Part of me, a small petty part, wanted to let it happen, to let Amber feel the sting of betrayal, to know what it felt like to have everything ripped away. But no, that would be too easy. I wanted them both to pay. I picked up my phone and dialed Dave S.'s number. I need you to do something for me, I said when he answered. I'm almost afraid to ask, Dave replied warily. I need you to tip off Amber about Jake S.'s plan to double-cross her. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Brad, what are you playing at? I smiled, cold and hard. Divide and conquer, Dave. If they are fighting each other, they want to see me coming. Dave sighed heavily. All right, I'll do it. But Brad, be careful, man. You are walking a dangerous line here. I hung up without responding. I knew I was walking a dangerous line. Hell, I left dangerous in the dust days ago, but I was past caring. All that mattered now was making them pay. The next day, I put the second phase of my plan into action. I reached out to another old contact, a private security consultant named Ryan. He worked for me on a few high-stakes deals in the past, providing muscle when negotiations got tense. I need you to acquire something for me, I told him, sliding an envelope across the table. Ryan opened it, his eyebrows rising as he looked at the contents. This is some heavy shit, Brad. You sure about this? I nodded, my face set in grim determination. Whatever it takes, Ryan. I need those documents. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll get it done. But this is a one-time deal, you hear me? After this, we were done. Understood, I said, standing up to leave. And Ryan, make it look like a random break-in, nothing that can be traced back to me. As I walked away, I felt a twinge of something. Guilt, regret. I pushed it down. There was no room for those emotions now. I was too far down this road to turn back. The day of Jake S.'s flight arrived. I sat in my car across from his apartment, watching as he loaded his bags into a taxi. He looked nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. Good. Let him sweat. As the taxi pulled away, I started my engine and followed at a discreet distance. Everything was in place. Now it was just a matter of timing. We were about halfway to the airport when it happened. A black SUV cut off Jake S.'s taxi, forcing it to screech to a halt. Two men in dark suits jumped out, yanking Jake from the back seat. I watched from a distance as they roughed him up, making it look like a mugging gone wrong. But I knew better. Those men were professionals, hired to do one specific job: retrieve the documents Jake was carrying. It was over in minutes. The men sped off, leaving Jake bruised and shaken on the side of the road. I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. Phase 2, complete. I circled back, parking a little ways down the street. Jake was still there, talking animatedly on his phone. Even from this distance, I could see the panic on his face. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Package acquired. Dropping it at the arranged location. Perfect. Everything was falling into place. I waited until Jake had gotten back into his taxi before making my next move. I dialed a number I knew by heart, my heart pounding as it rang. Hello? Amber S. voice, wary and slightly breathless. Having a bad day? I asked, unable to keep the smugness out of my voice. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Brad? What do you want? Oh, I think you know what I want, Amber. The same thing Jake wanted. The same thing you've been chasing all along. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. I laughed, cold and hard. Come on, Amber. We are past lying to each other, Don, do you think? I know about the documents. I know about the offshore accounts. I know everything. There was a long pause. When Amber spoke again, her voice was steel. What do you want, Brad? Meet me. 1 hour. You know the place. I hung up before she could respond. My heart was racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was it. The end game. I drove to our old spot, a secluded overlook where we used to come to watch the sunset. It seemed fitting somehow that this is where it would all end. Amber arrived right on time, her face a mask of anger and fear. She stalked towards me, her eyes blazing. Where are they? She demanded. I smiled, holding up a thick envelope. Right here, everything you and Jake have been working towards. All your plans, all your secrets. Amber's eyes fixed on the envelope, her hand twitching as if she wanted to snatch it from me. What do you want? She asked again, her voice tight. What do I want? I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. I want my life back, Amber. I want the last 5 years of my life that I wasted loving you. I want to go back to before I knew what a lying, cheating snake you really are. Amber flinched as if I slapped her. Brad, save it. I cut her off. I don't want your apologies or your excuses. I want justice. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screen. On it was a simple message, send. One press of this button, I said, and everything goes to the police. All the evidence of your fraud, your theft, everything. You and Jake will spend the next decade in prison. Amber's face drained of color. You wouldn't eat, she whispered. Wouldn't I asked, my finger hovering over the button. You took everything from me, Amber. My money, my future, my trust. Why shouldn't I return the favor? Tears were streaming down Amber's face now. Please, Brad, don't do this. I'll give it all back. The money, everything. Just please. I stared at her, this woman I had once loved more than anything in the world. Now, looking at her tear-stained face, I felt nothing. No anger, no love, not even satisfaction. Just a vast, empty numbness. Slowly, I lowered the phone. You know what, Amber? You're not worth it. You're not worth the energy it would take to destroy you. You and Jake, you deserve each other. I tossed the envelope at her feet. Take it. Take it all. Go live your life of lies and deceit. But know this every time you look in the mirror, every time you close your eyes at night, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember what you threw away, what you became, and that will be my revenge. I turned and walked away, Amber's sobs echoing behind me. As I got into my car, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't the ending I had planned, not the revenge I had dreamed of, but somehow it felt right. As I drove away, leaving Amber and all the pain and betrayal behind, I realized something. The man who had walked into this overlook, hell-bent on revenge, wasn't the same man driving away. That man had been consumed by anger, by a need for retribution. This man was free. I pulled over to the side of the road, suddenly overwhelmed by emotion. Tears streamed down my face as I laughed and sobbed at the same time. It was over, really, truly over. I don't know how long I sat there, letting out years of pent-up emotion. When I finally calmed down, I pulled out my phone and dialed Dave's number. It's done, I said when he answered. You okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I thought about it for a moment. Yeah, I said, surprised to find that it was true. Yeah, I think I am. So what now? Dave asked. I looked out at the setting sun, a small smile playing on my lips. Now? Now I start over. Clean slate, fresh start, no more looking back. As I hung up and started the car, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, full of challenges and unknowns. But for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to it. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning.